Hi everyone, welcome to our 10:15 session, Driving K-12 Innovation. My name is Abigail Owen and I will be your Zoom moderator today. We are very fortunate to have three amazing speakers today and I will pass it off to them.
Yeah, hi, I'm Kim Flintoff here from Curtin University in Perth, Western Australia. It's currently 1:15 in the morning for me, and I'm looking forward to sharing some insights. Along with the other panelists, we've been involved with the CoSN's Driving K-12 Innovation project for the last couple of years, and we want to talk about where that's arrived at. In fact, we're just about due to launch the final report for this year today, I believe. But I'll let the other two introduce themselves. David.
Hi. Well, my name is David, Dave. You can call me whatever.
David,
my name is very international, and since I've been living abroad, I am used to be calling a huge variety of names. So you can call me whatever you want. I am living in Spain now, so it's not so late here in Spain, but it's 7 in the evenings. So very happy to spend here some time sharing the experience with the Driving K-12 Innovation. I have been working in this project also, like Kim, in the last couple of years, and also to share the implications of innovation and how can it help us in the actual situation, so we can reflect together on how to use those innovations to face the challenges that we have now.
Good morning. My name is Frankie Jackson. It's a pleasure to be here with you this morning. I am serving as the Director of Strategic Initiatives for the Texas Chief Technology Officer Council. I've served 25 years as a Chief Technology Officer. So I come to you from the perspective of educational technology leadership, and we'll be sharing my experiences in working with the Consortium of School Networking on this great body of work that we'll be discussing today, Driving K-12 Innovation. So it's a pleasure to be here. You have a lot of choices. We certainly are glad that you chose to join us. So back to you, Ken.
No problem. Thanks, Frankie. So I'll bring up our slide set to get us going here, and we'll be talking this through. Abby will be monitoring the chat, and if there's any questions that people have, you're welcome to interject on chat, and Abby will pass those forward to us. So the CoSN project, Driving K-12 Innovation, began a couple of years ago, as I understand it. Was certainly when I was first invited to start participating, and that was a follow-on from the original old K-12 Horizon report that came from the New Media Consortium. And I know Frankie can talk at length about that, as you will shortly. So we're just going to move forward there. Oops. There, the report looks at. Not sure what's happening there. The report looks at a range of things. Three main focus areas: looking at the hurdles that we face as educators in the technology space, the enablers that arise around us that make the engagement with and the use of technology more effective, and the accelerators are the driving factors in our world. And we've seen most recently with the global pandemic has certainly become an accelerator for driving people to utilize online spaces, to utilize virtual classrooms and those sort of things. So we began looking at a lot of these things more than a year ago, and it was interesting. Despite the pandemic, we really sort of nailed a lot of the key priorities that have certainly become really important in recent months. So I think we'll continue with taking it forward. Does David or Frankie want to contribute to that?
No, we may have some other comments as we move through the slides.
Okay. And of course, none of this happens in isolation. CoSN is well supported by a lot of organisations large and small, mainly large, and we recognise them and thank them for their support for making this possible, and also for making sure that the report is able to be distributed globally and start to inform educators around the world on new ways of thinking and new ways of working with their students and with technology. I'll hand over to Frankie on this one. This is one that she's quite passionate about here.
Yeah, I'm very passionate about this body of work, primarily because serving as an education technology leader, ranging from school districts from 25,000 students to up to 117,000 students, there was always the need to try and secure more funding for education. So going back as far as 2009, this emerging technologies in K-12 education has been an area of focus. So for example, if you could probably just go out on the internet and do some of your own searches. If you have a copy of this presentation, all of these links are hot. So for example, the 2009 points to a Horizon report that was a K-12 edition, and each year, a new edition of this report would be introduced. And the way that I used the report was that I would look at the report. It was a survey of all the emerging technologies. And when I was putting together budgets for the school districts that I supported, I would go back to those reports and say, what do I need to be planning for in the next year, in the next 1 to 3 years, to the next 3 to 5 years. So for example, going all the way up to 2013, I was part of an educational body that was putting forth a bond, which is a way that many school districts across the nation get funding. And the bond was for $1.2 billion. So the report of 2013 actually drove the process to get those funds approved. So I'm just trying to explain to you how important this work has been, and it's, you can see there's a long history of it. In 2018, the approval process for generating the report changed to transition to the Consortium of School Networking, but the reports have been in existence for many years. In 2019, there was a transition. So what we'll be talking about today is the 2020 report. So it's a very sound body of knowledge that not only for historical purposes, but for guiding innovative technologies and paving the way for the future in education. So it's a very exciting time, and it's very nice to have all of this research information and have those individuals focused on it so that we can continue to make positive change in our education and hopefully in our workforce. Back to you, Ken.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I can't remember quite when I came on board with the NMC, but I certainly remember around 2008, 2009, doing a lot of virtual work with the NMC. We were actually doing a lot of investigation into virtual worlds, and it's funny. It's quite ironic that here we are 10 years later, and having to rediscover all the possibilities. I remember spending a lot of time on the NMC campus in Second Life, and tonight for me, this morning for you guys, the session in Verbella was very reminiscent of the sorts of things that we were considering about how could we bring those possibilities to school children, to schools and centres, and even though there was a lot of advocacy for bringing those virtual spaces to students, there was still a lot of resistance. And now, suddenly, with one microscopic organism, has given us an impetus to actually not only make it desirable, but actually to make it necessary in order to continue with a viable education system. So it's really interesting to see that even that early work that was done more than 10 years ago has relevance today, and we can only imagine what the work that we've been doing the last 2 years is, how that's going to play out in the next 10 years. David?
I just wanted to add something, if you leave me. One of the things that are very important about those reports. We are using a lot them here in Europe also. I suggest all the school leaders every time I work with them to take a look not just to the last reports, but also to the oldest one. And the point is that you can realize how accurate they were to find the key technologies and the key way to face the transition and the introduction of the technology to help us to improve the learning processes. And I do believe that the last reports published, the 2018 and 2020, are very valuable also, because the perspective changed a lot, changed slightly, but I think that there is a very nice perspective that I hope we can transmit it to you today. Talking not just about the technologies that are useful, but also to the obstacles that you can find when you introduce those innovations in your district, in your school, in your university, and also the enablers. And some of them, most of them are not technology. Another thing that you have to take into account to introduce those technologies that will change the way we learn and we teach. So that I just wanted to point that, take a look to the oldest reports and realize how important this work is, and take the last reports and see the projection that they will have in the next years.
Thanks, David. I think the current slide's talking about how the reports that we've generated are quite unique in a way. They're great, insightful tools. They're a capture of a moment in time. But the way that they come into being, I think, is probably something that perhaps people might like to understand a little bit too, the process of how we gather as a community, put forward ideas, interrogate those ideas, and then surface through a Delphi-like process the most relevant of those ideas to put forward into the reports. So would Frankie or David like to comment on that?
You know, again, it's just like I was saying, you know, it is an extremely unique tool, and there's no other tool like it that I'm aware of. And I've been in this business for many, many years. And so I think that the main thing is just really for strategic planning, because when it is that, you know, you go forth and are asking for millions of dollars, you really have to have that justification. And that justification often comes from these reports. And so they're extremely valuable.
Yeah, I think too, and that's sort of a grand scale for many teachers. I mean, the average individual teacher working at the chalk face in the classroom, I think, can quite comfortably turn to the report as well and find not only incentives to start looking for new ways of doing things, but also validation of the work that they're often doing without any recognition. You know, discovering that they're actually on the right path, that they're actually doing work that is comparable to the most exemplary work in the world. And very often, I think, as a single teacher in a classroom, we can feel very, very isolated, and that the report can give us a lot of comfort that we're actually doing the right thing and moving forward with great opportunities for our students. I think you're on mute there, David.
Sorry, now, I was saying that at the end, you will find that it's not just something theoretical, but you will find a lot of practical examples in the reports and in the toolkit that we made it last year, and hope we will share something this year too. And also all of the advisors that are working in this project, and we will see now how many of them and from where we are sharing our own practices, and we are learning a lot from each other, and we are at the end putting all those work, all those innovations that we are doing all around the world in this document that we are sharing with not just with you here, but with the rest of the world to make it useful to introduce new innovation in the learning process.
Right, and I'm just noticing in the chat there too that Norton Gusky has pointed out that there's also a toolkit that accompanies the report too, which actually can help with disseminating information. So it's actually about sharing the insights of exemplary teachers very often and exemplary practice across systems into areas where they have not yet reached as standard practices. So that process of disseminating, of amplifying, of sharing insights really does start to take hold. And we'll just move forward here. So we have a truly global advisory board, heavily represented by the United States, not unsurprisingly, but we do have a lot of voices from around the world playing into the report. I'm guessing, Frankie, you're probably more familiar with the US context than the rest of us on this one. Would you like to give some insights into how significant this work is and the role of the US perspective?
Yeah, I think, when you really look at the way CoSN is organized, it's a national level association, and it is the premier association for education technology leaders. There's no other association that I think has as much influence. But then within each state, most states have a chapter association. So for example, I work for the Texas K-12 CTO Council, and that council is the state level chapter for CoSN in the state of Texas. And many of the other states are organized very, very similar. And it's a way to centralize not only at the state level, because every state is different, but also to be able to validate at the national level. And then having other countries represented brings even more power to the work that we're doing, especially when we're dealing with a global pandemic. I think it's been extremely helpful, and I predict that it'll continue to grow and will continue to grow globally, and so that certainly is my hope.
Fantastic, and I certainly find that being one of the representatives of the Australian community who contributes to the report, it really is interesting because we often feel quite isolated, tucked away in our little corner of the world, and to see that the work that we're doing is often at times quite cutting edge and quite it takes on quite a leaderly sort of role. So it's really interesting that the largest states where there's a wealth of activity happening across the US, but with smaller countries around the world, there can be really interesting pockets of activity that can actually inform and start to grow this thing. So that the global perspective, I think can't be overlooked. It really is a very significant contribution to the global discussion around education. Okay, and moving forward. Now our process. David, do you want to comment on your experience of the process so far?
Okay, I can share something about it. I do believe we should be faster in this part and go to the discussion soon, but it is very important to understand more or less how we have been working on this process to arrive to the conclusions that we will share with you right now about the hardwares, accelerators, and tech enablers. At the very beginning of the process, what we did was to answer to a pre-survey to define the topics for discussion. There were a few ones, but I think that the most funny of the process was that a lot of new topics appeared since all of us were sharing a lot of information, a lot of experiences, and we realized that there were much more to discuss than was expected at the very beginning. And then the discussion started with defining some prompts, and the conversation started. It was very funny at this point for me in my experience that a lot of problems were common. It's not just something from Europe, it's not just something from Australia. There are a lot of problems that are common, and the solutions that all of us were introducing to solve those problems were very useful to the rest of the advisory board to imagine what were the solutions. So at the end, after the discussion, we made a post survey, and from that point, the people in CoSN were amazing and wrote a great report that is what we are sharing with you, not just in English, but in another languages. We are working now in the translation to Spanish, to Portuguese, German, French. I am coordinating some of those translations. So as you can imagine, the aim of the report, the aim of the work that we're doing is making as global as possible. And the reason is that the problems are common and the solutions are very useful for all of us. So it is very important to share and this work, even now in times of pandemic, it's very important to keep together, to work together, to share, and to create the future that will come from the experience of all of us. So I'm happy and I'm very fortunate to participate in this work. So thank you so much, Kim, Frankie, and the rest of the board.
Yeah. One of the things that struck me this year was the shift. The previous Horizon reports that very much focused on specific technologies and their application in systems. What really started to happen this year was a shift towards different mindsets, different ways of thinking, different practices, different approaches, the way systems were operating, the assumptions that we make about education. A lot of those things started to come far more to the fore as important priorities in what were the drivers of innovation. And I think we'll shortly take some time to do some breaking out and discussing different sections of the various reports. Frankie, have you got anything to add at this stage?
I put some notes in the chat just to start a conversation and make sure that everyone understands the amount of work that went into putting the 2020 report together. I volunteered. I really didn't expect for it to be as time-consuming and thorough, which really lends itself to giving the report even more credibility. It was a tremendous amount of work and really pushed me to work as hard as I've ever worked on any initiative that I've been a part of as an education technology leader. So when you read the reports, know that there's a lot of work that went into it, and everyone that was on the board took it very, very serious. They did a really good job.
Yeah, and it didn't end with the survey. It actually continued through the whole writing process right up until and to publication. Is that the opportunity to contribute, to adjust, modify the expression of the ideas that were being put forward was there right until the point where someone pushed the button to publish. So it's an interesting exercise. And so that probably brings us to our 5 key hurdles, accelerators, and enablers. And we'll take a moment to look at those, and then we'll probably break into 3 groups. Is that what we're going to do?
So,
yes. While I'm screen sharing, I can't actually get to my running order. So, so just to quickly recap here, the hurdles that were surfaced as the most influential hurdles to overcome were how do we scale and sustain innovation, issues surrounding data privacy and ownership of that data, and obviously that's got a lot to do with student protection and staff protection as well. But there's a lot of factors around that, and we've seen issues in Australia today where health data has been released without the permission of all the people involved, and they're the sorts of concerns that people saw as as we move more and more into digital states. Is how do we control and manage the security of the data that's being gathered, and how does it become meaningfully used in a very safe way? So those are some of the questions that started to rise. The evolution of teaching and learning. I mean, we actually began to question our very practice. We started to consider whether or not our standard teacher-directed, curriculum-led models were the most effective. Are there other ways of functioning? We also saw, and this certainly came to light with the as COVID made itself known, the shift from pedagogy, the gap that exists between pedagogy and technology is being able to apply the most appropriate pedagogy with the most appropriate technological solutions. And as everyone rushed to remote learning, we discovered very quickly that there was a lot of people who were not well versed in how to best use the technology, that using technology in a classroom is very different than using technology when everyone else is sitting in their living room or their bedrooms at home. And another factor of that too was the digital equity side of things, as we discovered that not everyone had broadband access, not everyone had one device. Sometimes there was one device in an entire family, and there were demands for work, and there was multiple students in the household, and all sorts of other priorities coming to play. So those issues were all surfaced, and we had these down as hurdles this time last year before we had even considered that COVID would be around. So I'll let Frankie, do you feel like just talking through the accelerators here?
Sure. I was going to go back to hurdles, but just this whole digital.
No,
I was just going to say, this digital equity with the hurdles that we didn't know what was going to be happening globally with the pandemic, and a lot of the work and a lot of the research and conversations that are now, mainstream in terms of what we're dealing with now with digital equity. Fortunately, not only because of this report, there was already a lot of research and a lot of conversations about what types of accelerators could be brought in to solve each one of these hurdles, one of which was digital equity, as well as technology enablers. So when you think of hurdles as the things that are most difficult to overcome in education, and then accelerators as being the things that we have potentially control over to try to accelerate the process of jumping over that hurdle so that we can continue to move forward. And then what are the technologies that will support those hurdles that will help us get there faster? So it's really kind of a combination of all three. The accelerator, for example, if you just take the digital equity, all of those really apply to accelerate digital equity. And then of course with enablers being moving to the cloud, using more mobile devices, having more available, and then that brings about different types of collaboration platforms. So one feeds one another, and so they really all work in concert with each other. And I think that's what I found so interesting about the work.
Yeah, and David?
Yeah, for me it was surprising how useful this was, even when we didn't expect it a pandemic when working on it. It's amazing how some of the hurdles that we found are some of the biggest problems that we face it. Thinking on equity, thinking on how the pedagogy and technology interact with each other, or the point about the data privacy. And we saw in a lot of schools all around the world, I am sure that Kim and Frankie have the same experience, that some of the accelerators that we identified are helping the schools to transitionate very quickly and to avoid the hurdles that we identified. And the point is that we are also observing how the tech enablers identify that also very useful to provide a meaningful learning experience to the students. So taking into account that this is pre-pandemic, that all this work was done before the COVID-19, the neighbors found, for instance, we will be working about them in a room in the next minutes. The digital collaboration platforms are a key in the learning experience that we are providing now that we cannot go to the schools. And that means that we have to take into account a lot of considerations that we didn't have before about the privacy, the safety of online. Those in some schools, for some teachers, for some school leaders, were not something to be worried about. And now they realize that they are key to provide a safe learning experience. And also the technology help us to provide this new way to face the learning, taking into account the personalization with analytics, adaptive learning, these kind of things that help us to provide a different learning experience that has to take into account working in a group, but also now help us to provide a more accurate and more personalized learning experience and help each student to get what they need in each moment. So again, I am surprised when reviewing all the work done, how accurate and how useful it is for a crisis like the one we are living in.
Yeah, I think there's a whole range of factors at play there, and we've certainly seen that, under tech enablers in the current crisis. Digital collaboration platforms have become absolutely critical in the process. For me, the accelerators side of things is I've always understood the accelerators as those practices and those priorities that are changing already within the education systems that mean that we need to innovate more effectively, that we need to address that drive us to more effectively and more purposefully address the hurdles that we face. So things like systems are demanding more and more data-driven decision making. They're demanding more and more evidence-based approaches to things. So therefore, data-driven practice is actually driving our need to collect more data, to use more data more effectively. But that then presents us with a challenge of that with all that data, we now have a set of responsibilities that go along with that to make sure that the data is protected, to make sure that student privacy is taken care of, to make sure that we're actually using those things more meaningfully. So, as you say, these things are all interwoven. I think what we'd like to do for the last, we've got about 15 minutes left, and I think what we probably want to do is now just divide briefly, maybe 5 to 10 minutes into is it 3 groups that we're going to do? Frankie, I can't see my running order here. So
yes, I believe we were going to do the 3 groups, and then we were going to do the polls. I think that it would be very nice to be able to get some data from those that are participating with us. And I don't know if we've got time to do it all, so we can decide if we wanted to do both and do them quickly, or it's up to you. I think the polls would be fascinating.
Okay. Abby, you're driving the polls, is that right?
Yes, I am, and they're all ready to go. Just tell me when.
Okay. Well, let's just follow. Given that we've talked a lot and haven't asked the audience to do very much, let's get our poll questions underway.
First one going up.
So this is about your experiences in your own context. And so what are the most important hurdles and barriers for schools to address in the current moment in order to pave the way for teaching and learning innovation and extraordinary student outcomes? So of the 5 things, which speak most to your context? So we've got 10 votes there. We've got 25 people in the room. There we go. A few more popping up. Certainly digital equity is a high priority at the moment by the look of things. And David's posted a link to a Google Doc where you can put your other ideas forward as well. So let's perhaps end that poll there. Oh no, we're still getting a few votes coming through. There we go. So is there anyone in our audience who would like to comment on the digital equity side of things? It's risen as of sort of 50% of the attendees see it as an important priority. How does it manifest itself in your experience? Does anyone like to put forward some comments? Oh, sorry.
Kim, are you asking us?
I was asking the audience there.
Okay,
so,
let's see.
So are the poll results visible to the audience now? Yes, okay. So there were 3 there. That was the evolution of teaching and learning, pedagogy, technology gap, and the digital equity side of things were the 3 that surfaced as most relevant to the attendees, and more than 50% of those that voted identified digital equity. So how is digital equity being perceived as a hurdle in your experiences? So lack of device and connectivity from some families? Absolutely. And I believe there's actually Paul Signorelli and others are the Shaping Edu community is actually looking at driving a call for broadband throughout the US for everyone. And from what I believe is that there's been situations where they've had to take buses into parking lots to have basically a portable Wi-Fi signal that people can access. So yeah, absolutely generational understanding of connectivity and technology itself. That's certainly something that I think we're all quite aware of. And that was something that came through in our discussions as we put the document together. Yes, quiet spaces to work and appear in meetings. That's something I'm sitting here. The rest of my family is asleep in the other part of the house. My wife comes out and glares at me occasionally for making too much noise at 2 o'clock in the morning. So very familiar with that one. And yeah, content creation, that's something that we probably didn't address deeply in our discussions, but certainly content creation is a huge aspect of the whole digital equity experience, is that there's a lot of material that unless you have the right devices, you can't access it. And yeah, Chromebooks can be slow. That's often mainly because they're a web-based device, is that that often comes back to, again, to bandwidth. And I'm just quickly looking there, teaching adaptability to more digital, consistent, sustainable foundation to leverage within pedagogical development and learning innovation. So I think we're starting to see how those things start to play out across some of these other elements there. Any comments, David or Frankie?
No,
No,
sorry,
I'm just going.
Frankie, go.
No, I was just going to say all of these comments are fantastic, and are just so applicable to the body of work. And I think if I get the opportunity to be on the advisory board next year, certainly will pass these types of comments along in this discussion that's going to continue, I'm sure, in the future around digital equity.
Mm. Okay, can we move with the next question there, Abby? So, Abby, can we have question 2 on the poll, please? Oh, looks like we've lost our moderator. Let's see what we can do there.
Here she is.
Sorry about that.
Okay,
Don't
I'll
worry.
just go. Oh, there we go. I can see it now. I'm launching poll 2. So this looks at the accelerators question with basically the same question in hand. Is what are the most important accelerators, or what trends exist for schools in the current moment to pave the way for the shifts that need to occur in teaching and learning innovation, and to provide high quality and extraordinary student outcomes? There we go. Oh, a bit of diversity occurring. So this one, there's a lot more.
Yeah, it's moving and changing.
A lot more spread occurring. Yeah. I'm particularly interested in the notion of learners as creators. I've been involved in a project that began just prior to Easter, called STEM for Innovation, where we have asked K-12 students to contribute to solving community problems that relate to the pandemic. So this coming Friday, we have a group of students who will be presenting solutions to one of our national highly regarded researchers and surgeons on how COVID can be better managed inside operating theatres in our hospitals. And so the learners are actually creating solutions, creating models of practice, and contributing into statewide concerns around health. And so we have industry representatives and health representatives and government officials coming along to this presentation on Friday. So for me, that's a really interesting thing, is giving student voice and empowering our students to actually be effective contributors to our community is really important. Looking at some of the comments there. So I think we might just close that one off then. We'll end that poll there and share the results. So again, we have a good spread of opportunities there. I'm just scanning the comments. So K.A. Kennedy says, worked in a district and never had the SAMA model, or even how to move students from using a device as a pencil to creating. So yeah, even up to last year. And I think that's part of the journey, is that every school, every system, every individual classroom moves at its own rate. And something like this report can help move those things forward more quickly. But oftentimes there are factors that that can limit our ability to respond effectively as well. And that's part of what this this series of reports begins to address.
And I think that it's very important how the people has chosen social and emotional learning, because we realize how important it is now that we have to move from the face-to-face environment where this is more natural. Now we have to make it explicit, to make an effort to get engaged with the rest of the teachers, with the rest of the students with each other. So it's very important how this, we realize how important it is.
Absolutely, and I think the notion of personalization and social emotional learning goes sort of hand in hand as well, in that the two are very closely related. Your sense of worth is about having your priorities recognized in your learning experiences, and they start to come through. A lot of the comments I'm seeing in the chat at the moment relate to the inequity that exists between the sorts of devices that people have access to, and that oftentimes it's the less privileged contexts where there's, I wouldn't like to call them second-rate devices, but devices that minimise or don't allow full access to the rich possibilities of a digital education really do start to come to light.
If you agree, we can pass to the tech enablers since we just have 5 minutes.
Yep, no worries. So I'll take that one out and we'll move on now to the final of the polls. And this one is relating to the enablers and what are the most important enablers for schools to leverage in the current moment to surmount the hurdles and to embrace the accelerators. So I invite everyone to take the poll. We've got digital collaboration platforms, tools for privacy and safety, analytics, cloud infrastructure and mobile devices. And just while people are voting, I'll just pick up on some of the comments here. I noticed that Sturgios says that technology can provide the learner with a personalised experience, but very often the pedagogical choices that are offered to learners can limit the degree to which things are personalised. You can have a very teacher-directed, very linear pathway that doesn't provide the opportunities for the students to have that sort of personal input. So I think we do start to see at times that that pedagogy technology gap does start to come into play. So certainly, and I think the responses that we're getting here at the moment, I'll just put those
And they are clear
results forward.
Yeah.
So certainly, I mean, digital collaboration platforms we've discovered in the last few months, and this is certainly front of mind for everyone, is what's the most effective visual platform. You know, we've got 3 or 4 running during this conference, but you know, people have battled with WebEx, with Zoom, with GoToMeeting, with a range of other platforms, starting to move into virtual spaces, and one of the things I find that certainly with virtual worlds, you know, places like Verbella and the Mozilla hubs and other spaces which hark back to old spaces like Second Life, is the ability for users to create really interesting artifacts within those spaces, which are often not readily available inside the video spaces. The video spaces, I think, in oftentimes are quite limiting. It's nice to see people's faces, but sometimes you can do a lot more in a space where you control the environment more.
Yeah, and it is also very important that the 3 points that the people choose, that is the digital collaboration platforms, analytics and adaptive technologies, and mobile devices, make a great combination together. If you think of them together, you see how powerful it is, a solution that allows to collaborate, but also provides you the analytics, not just as a teacher, but also as a learner, gives you information about how are you learning, and also it helps you to adapt the learning experience to your needs, and you can learn wherever you are using your mobile devices. So you can see how powerful it is, the combination of the 3 key tech enablers that the people chose. So I think it's very clear what the people need, and that's great.
Yeah. I think it's really interesting too, is that the context of this really drives. I mean, certainly a lot of the respondents to this poll today will certainly be from North America and possibly a few from Europe. But in Australia, certainly where I'm here in Western Australia, the pandemic hit. Our government dealt with it very, very well, and our schools really only took a 2-week bump in proceedings. So we haven't had to enter into that phase of radical transformation of our practices. And very often, many of our teachers here are back doing what they were doing just a few months ago, and without a lot of need to make a lot of changes. And so that whole, I think there's a lot more diversity in the global experience at the moment than we might have imagined, given that the news that we're seeing is that schools are shut in some parts of the world, schools are reopening, others. There are a few pockets around the world, and I happen to be sitting in one of them where it really wasn't felt very significantly at all. And so I certainly see some of the teachers I'm dealing with at the moment are almost complacent about the whole process that they've been faced with, and they haven't had to question their practice very deeply. So I'm interested in that. We've only got about a minute or two now, so I'm quite happy to take some questions from the floor, so to speak, and we'll head towards wrapping this up. So thanks very much, Greg, for that. I'm noticing there that Ashley's commenting on the need for ongoing research, and that's one thing that the reports also offer, is they offer a whole lot of areas of focus where research can be undertaken as well. So certainly, I mean, coming from a university background, I encourage everyone to look at the research opportunities and higher education pathways.
Yeah, and for sure, if you don't have questions now, we can keep on the conversation using social networks and anything. So it's very easy to contact with CoSN, with us. I think that we are very open to share and to keep on talking. So we invite you to read the report and to keep on the conversation online.
Thank you very much.
Thank
take
you.
those reports down, and I thank Abby for looking after us throughout this session. Thanks to everyone for attending. Thank you, our panelists, David and Frankie, and I hope the rest of you enjoy the rest of the week on Learning Human, and I'm looking forward to some other sessions, and I hope to catch up with some of you throughout the week.